let me ask you just before I let you go about the situation with Matt Gaetz. I personally don't really care about whether Kevin McCarthy or Jim Jordan or some other standard issue Republican is the Speaker of the House. It kind of amazed me exactly for that reason that so many people seem so upset that Matt Gaetz was successful in fostering the removal of Kevin McCarthy from that speakership. I don't just mean Republicans who supported Kevin McCarthy because he gives them a lot of power, but I mean like journalists who ordinarily would hate Kevin McCarthy. They just seem so upset by any kind of like instability or deviation from norms. I never realized until this week that Kevin McCarthy was such an extraordinary linchpin of American security and prosperity, but apparently he is, given how upset people are by his removal, who ordinarily would be saying only bad things about Kevin McCarthy. You worked in Congress in a bunch of different capacities. You talked a little bit about what your views were on all of this. What are your views about what happened this week with Matt Gaetz and McCarthy?
Well, I call it the norm ferry. Like, people get very upset when you like cross the norm ferry. Like, there's all these norms that, that stuff just isn't done, right? And when I look at Congress, it's one of the most loathed institutions in American politics, and they're not governing. And I mean, people want Congress to do things that make better, and Congress isn't doing that, and they're really mad about it. And to me, that's the giant scandal. All this process stuff, which is essentially like arguments about like seating charts and like who gets different parking spaces, like that stuff shouldn't matter when you have an institution that is like has been at 10% approval for decades.
Yeah, like they were so upset that like after this happened, some of these Republicans expelled some of the Democrats from the big, nice offices. Like the journalists were incredibly upset by that like, I don't know, some random Democrat doesn't get one of the nice views any longer of the mall.
Right. It's like, yeah, that was Steny Hoyer. And then they now call it a Speaker Emeritus, Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, yeah. Where did that come from? How did she get, what is that? Like, so once you're speaker, you're like an emeritus, like a professor who is always a professor until they die, even if they're not teaching classes any longer. She's just like the speaker emeritus, like hovering over the Capitol with her spirit until she takes the path of Dianne Feinstein. Where does this all come from? It's like noble gentry or like lifelong titles.
I think there's just like this weird clinging on to like all of these kind of myths that our institutions work and are worth preserving in sort of their existing form, and really a fear of what might come next. And I think one of the interesting things about Matt Gaetz, and I don't agree with him on a lot of different policies, but he's actually like saying he cares about different policy objectives. And that's what, I mean, from what I could see, and I've watched him, and he is just like, he does not care. He's just like, this is what I think, and I'm going to pursue this policy. He's just like, Congress needs to govern. And I don't agree with how Matt Gaetz would use Congress to govern, but that's his main problem. And so I think that when he got, engineered this ouster of Kevin McCarthy and doesn't care about the norm ferry or process, I think he reflects more what most people think than all of this other norm nonsense where they're like, oh my gosh, everything is working so well. It's like, no, it's not. And then, like Ro Khanna comes out and says, hey, how about a deal where we can like restore the rules in a more stable way, but then we get rid of like the ability of members of Congress to engage in stock trading or take PAC money. And Matt Gaetz comes out and says, I would do that deal. And so it's like, this is actually the interesting conversation going on, and all the norm stuff, all the civility stuff, like that stuff is kind of important in a system that's functional and legitimate and that people like generally trust, but that's not the situation that we're in right now. So that it's like a fascinating dynamic to watch.
Exactly. That's why I really do say, I mean, this is what my reaction was to this. And of course, some of the major theme of this show, that obviously like left versus right, conservative versus liberal still matter in a lot of debates. But I think the much more relevant metric in our politics these days is whether you regard these institutions as fundamentally and inherently legitimate and worthy of preservation, or whether you like when they're subverted and disrupted, because they deserve to be. And what is so interesting, Matt, is that a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals who supported the Bernie Sanders campaign, who were excited about AOC's election, had visions in their head that the left was going to do exactly this to the Democratic Party, that they were going to come in and start pressure Nancy Pelosi to cave into their priorities, threaten to remove her if she didn't, and they've done none of that. They've become this lockstep party, and a lot of the reforms that Matt Gaetz got the first time around when he wouldn't vote for Kevin McCarthy until the 15th ballot were reforms that a lot of people have been saying Washington needs. The ability of House members to demand specific issue votes, so you don't just vote yes or no on the entire government with the threat of a shutdown. A lot of these are very real reforms that he definitely thinks a lot about and cares a lot about. It's just amazing to watch these people. I think this is what it is in Washington, acting to protect these institutions that in reality everybody hates except for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a general, I used to be really interested in the procedural stuff, and I would sort of be like, you should go at Democrat. I'm a Democrat. You go at Democratic leadership and use leverage to and what has been interesting in antitrust is to actually like try to persuade with ideas and to see, in a lot of areas in the Biden administration, and they're not doing, I think, a particularly good job, but in antitrust, they really are. And it's because the people who are doing it, and they have support and opposition in both parties, actually are interested in governing and are interested in wielding power on behalf of the public interest. And I think what you see in both parties is they're just not thinking about the world that way. They're not thinking, how do I use my position of authority to govern, to make things better for people? Instead, there's a kind of like, they kind of lose their focus, and I think there are well-meaning people on both sides. I just think that there isn't a particularly strong focus on like the ultimate legitimacy and governing output of the institutions that they're in. And it's been this way for decades. And so, it's hard to do anything but laugh at this sort of silliness. And I agree. I think that there is something very annoying about the like faux radicalism like it's my side. They're my people. But there is something really frustrating about it, because I think it's opposed, and it's like I'm fine with working within the Democratic Party. That's what I do now to achieve policy objectives, and you can do that. But I just feel like you need to actually do it. Like that's really where we need to go. And I think you see the same poser type of stuff on the right as well. So I think that we do have a problem, like it's a systemic problem. And it is nice when you have these moments where you can sort of explore that. And I think that this is one of those moments where you can say, hey, maybe we really should reset the institution.
Yeah, well, it does seem like these institutional resets do generally come these days more from the right. I know you don't want to say that because you do work in the Democratic Party, or maybe you don't agree with that. We'll have you back on another time so that I can explain to you why you're wrong. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.